We need to find a way to get in good trouble, necessary trouble, if we're going to save America.
This is Paved. Welcome to the Necessary Trouble Show. Here's your host, my dad, S Fugett.
Thanks, Paige. Welcome back to the Necessary Trouble Show here at the Good Word Digital Studios. I have Paige's Pop Gene on today as our guest. My dad, S Fugett Jr., all-pro tight end with the Dallas Cowboys and the Washington, now called the Washington football team. Former Washington Post reporter, Fortune 1000 CEO, you name it. Just blessed to have my dad be my dad and join us today. Dad, thanks for making time for us out from Arizona to be a guest today.
Well, I just want to say it's really an honor to be on this historic podcast.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Now, I know we spoke and we recorded a podcast on my Russell Fugett Leadership, Legacy, and Love back in the beginning of the summer. You said that you did not think that the football leagues, any of these sports leagues, would really be able to continue. What has changed and what has allowed, obviously, the NBA completed this league, and now the NFL has completed, is in the midst of its season, although it's having some interruptions. What are your thoughts so far, and what do you see going out to the end of the year with the football league?
Now you were wondering about what the football league is doing?
Sure.
On the field, off the field?
Well, off the field in relation to COVID-19. Are they going to be able to complete the season?
Well, clearly it's a gamble because their football TV contracts did not guarantee revenue if games were canceled from acts of God, which probably the COVID may or may not qualify. So they had to figure out to play the games, and they were going to play the games even if they had to do replacement players.
Right.
Because they were, each NFL owner gets over $250 million in cash before they sell the first ticket. And that's from having the games on TV. So if the games aren't on TV, I don't know if they're going to write that check. So it from that point of view, and then boom, now it's back to the players who have not a lot of power. I mean, we've gotten to the point where we get a bigger share of the revenues, but still we're on the plantation. I mean, we don't run it. We're not partners. And anything that they say that they're partners, I mean, they are not. And the league, I mean, let's put it this way. The league is run on business. Just remember that this is only, the second year that helmets are regulated?
Right.
Now, your grandfather used to always joke about that, how he could take his helmet and put it in his pocket.
Right. He fold it up and put it in his back pocket after the game and go shake hands. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And then in 1972 and 73, I played with what they call a Rydell suspension helmet, which is ideal if they pick you up and drop you flat on your head. I mean, it's a rubber ring with ropes around the side. It's like the Little League helmet. It wasn't until the third season that I had the opportunity to have pads in my helmet. So anyway, if I start losing my memory during this interview, I have an excuse. At least that's what I tell the judge when I'm in court.
I know that's right. Now what have you seen in terms of the social justice moment that we're in and Black Lives Matter? I know obviously we have great legends who we know, like Abner Haynes, who fought injustice in the 60s during his time as a player. And I know you were very active during your time as a player around labor rights and player rights into the 70s, no freedom, no football. What have you seen? What are the correlations you would say from then to now in terms of how the players have used their voice to promote social justice?
Well, the biggest problem is that you have a lot of athletes in the National Football League. And unfortunately, most of them didn't have the benefit of a good education. Most don't even graduate from college and finish a degree. Not that a degree is important to be successful. LeBron James is very successful and has a number of degrees. but also he remembers where Akron, Ohio is. Okay, and what it was like before he was living in California, and it just hurts me to see that callous attitude of the young players. Now they kick some money back to the old players, but most that I see from reading the paper really don't understand what we had to suffer for them to get these $1 million contracts, and we just hope that that our suffering, was worthwhile, because now we're spawning generations of multimillionaires who are fundamentally ignorant on how they got to be a millionaire and how they can turn that millionaire into more. I mean, I'm working on my memoir, and I was thinking about my first day on Wall Street and how your uncle, Reginald F. Lewis, just laughed at me and said, every day you went to work, when you finished work, before you went home, you had to take a shower, man. What kind of job is that? I mean, you were a manual laborer. And I had to think about that. And when you're in a business, when you're going to get hurt almost every play, every day, and then the doctor who examines you is going to tell the coach before he tells you.
Right.
I mean, you just got to know what you're in. Now, money's worth it. You got to, learn how to take care of yourself. And certainly back in the 70s, we had to learn to take care of ourselves. We didn't have a regular orthopedic doctor again until my third year. I came into the NFL at a time when it was going from fist to fist fighting to technique, and it was becoming less of a wrestling fighting brawl to a game designed to be played on AstroTurf and on television, which meant smaller, faster players, more scoring, and developing the rules to benefit certain teams like Dallas to get to play on Thanksgiving, for example. So the NFL is a business, and it's a leader. So when President Trump attacked it, most of the owners, well, I won't say most, I don't know if it's most, but I will say the jet owners over in England trying to get golf events for the president, Woody Johnson. So a lot of the owners gave the president a lot of money, and they cowered because the protest was never about the military. My family served in the military. How far back has our family served in the military, Russ?
To the founding of this country.
Thank you. Revolutionary War. So, I mean, it wasn't about that. But Colin Kaepernick had a settlement, but he still doesn't have a job. And he's better than the red rifle we saw last night when the Cowboys got trounced. So I'm just saying, we move on, we make adjustments. But I don't know if I'm going to see justice in my lifetime, but I hope Paige does.
And so do I. And that's why we're doing this show. As part of that, to have this conversation, to have this documentation of this moment in time in our nation's history. I want to pivot a little bit to your experience being at the Washington Post, being at Channel 9 here in DC. Obviously there's been lots of attack and controversy around the media, and it seems to be really a bifurcation driven, partly by social media, but also there's clearly infiltration from outside perpetrators and other governments who are seeking to spread disinformation. As someone who worked in media, what are your thoughts on the landscape that we have in our news media, and how do we really protect the franchise that's so important in having a free democracy?
Well, when I first worked at the Washington Post, that was 1976, I guess.
Yeah.
76. And upon my briefing, I was reminded that it was the last plantation, with the White House being the plantation house. And to this day, it's not a state.
Right.
And the people who built it from enfant all the way to today are still there, and still they don't get representation in Congress, just like Puerto Rico. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's not fair. It's certainly not fair. And to have a chance to be working in the media at a time when the Hanafi Muslim siege occurred in DC, and to see Marion Barry come out of the district building on a stretcher, giving the Black Power salute, man. I mean, it was wild, okay?
Right.
And DC was happening because it was a place where we knew that the government was, that there were a lot of ideas, and change was in the air. But the forces of change always run into severe headwinds, and certainly over the last 4 years, we've seen that.
Now I know earlier this year you recently literally packed up and headed west and out to Arizona, and I know being connected on the ground there, you've observed some interesting things, and obviously the state is now a battleground state in so many ways, and of course there's a Senate race there as well. What have you observed in Arizona as that state has gotten a lot of attention in the presidential and Senate race, and even perhaps down ballot?
Well, number one, I would say it's a lot of opportunity here, and my father said that the one thing that we had to do as people is to go wherever the opportunity was, and we're always reminded of your Uncle Tony when he had a chance to work at IBM when they weren't taking many Black executives, and they gave him a choice of 3 posts, all excellent: North Dakota, South Dakota, and Omaha, Nebraska. And he said, okay, I'll take Warren Buffett, and went to Omaha. And he would work his way up the ranks and eventually be in White Plains, New York at the headquarters, working on their compensation plan. So it was a matter of going to where the opportunity was, and not waiting for the opportunity. As you know, your grandmother, Hazel Schloss's family, were slaves on George Washington's plantation. And when his stepson died and freed them, that was the Schloss family, which is my middle name. Where did they go, Russ? As far west as they could. Kentucky.
Right.
Yeah, that was the West Coast pretty much. And then they went from there to Kansas. Bloody Kansas, but free Kansas for African Americans, where my grandmother was born free. Now, her mother was born a slave and was freed and sent to Kansas, which was the safest place to be for African Americans. I mean, if you see what's going on Showtime, you can see why, because that's where John Brown was from. And nobody went and grabbed 12 years a slave from Kansas. So that's how your grandmother ended up going to the University of Kansas and knew Dr. Naismith, who invented basketball, and graduated in 1913, if I got the year right. And of course, she was one of the first AKAs. I think the Kansas chapter was maybe the 3rd chapter. Somebody tells me I got to do better on the history of what number chapter that was. But I know that she was already an AKA by then. And like your grandfather, got a letter from Booker T. Washington to come teach at Tuskegee. But anyway, I'm probably off track. Did I respond to your question?
No, I just wanted to get a lay of land what you're learning in Arizona. We were talking about
Okay, all right. So we historically
Arizona.
headed west. Okay, so we historically headed west, and I just became understood that there was the West is still new. This is a young country at 200 years. When I lived in France for 5 years, I was always reminded, that they've been around a lot longer than we have, and therefore they know how to do things better because they have more experience. And to an extent that's true, it's like for cooking and stuff. But America is still very new here, and there are people who've been suppressed for so long, especially in the South. I mean, there are people waiting in line hours and hours to vote. I mean, that's the reason for that. It's not by accident.
Right.
And I grew up hearing about guessing how many jelly beans there are in a jar, or they won't let you vote. And to show you that when people get in power, cruel things can happen. And history has taught us that. And the only protection against that is a democracy and the freedom to assemble on the streets, the freedom to represent, the freedom to go to the Olympics and get a gold medal and stick your fist in the air, the freedom to kneel at the national anthem. I wore black socks and they wouldn't let me play a freshman football game at Amherst because I was protesting. So it's not comfortable when people protest, and it's scary. I mean, one day in 1974, the NFL players went on strike against the NFL, and it was called the No Freedom, No Football strike. And we wanted to be able to be free agents. And up until 74, there were no free agents in the NFL. You could play your contract out, nobody would sign you. They could control you forever, almost like baseball. So to me, that was worth striking for. But yet I couldn't get but 7 players to come out on strike with me as a 21-year-old player rep. And they laughed at me. They said, Fugett, you can get a job. Yeah, I graduated. I still say I'm the youngest player in NFL history with a college degree. I didn't turn 21 until December of my rookie year. And that was with honors, by the way. So, yeah, I could get a job. I was highly employable. But at the same time, there was a much bigger battle that if we go on strike and can get parity with the owners, one day they would be making money like they're making today. No, I'm not going to get it. But maybe you, if you play, you could get it. Or your grandson can get it. See, and that's how America has always been. And I wasn't really striking for myself. I wasn't going to make a whole lot of money coming out of the strike. But we just to be free, just to have a chance to be treated fairly and equally by the owners. And that's what we were demanding. So as fate would have it, one day I was the only player out there picketing. Norm Hitchcock wrote a column about it in Dallas Morning News. The Gene Fugett, Tom Landry just shook his head. Mike Dicker yelled at me. Roger Staubach said, come on, come here. And I'm sitting there by myself with a picket sign, just like you were when you were up there with the food workers at Trinity. I'll never forget that. Russell led a protest at Trinity College with the food workers. And I got to tell you, after the protest, I had one of the best meals of my life. And I'm not saying that's why we protested, but boy, I tell you, that was good, Russ. No, because protest runs in our family, because if we see something, we're going to say something. And if we're going to do, and if we can do something, we're going to do it. Now, we're not going to jump in front of a speeding train or speeding boat, but if we can say something, we're going to say it. And that's how we've always been. And that's how, we were raised, and that's how we are. So boom, I was trying to say something. And of course, the next day I said I needed some help. And Gene Upshaw called and said, how's it going, Fugett? They just couldn't believe I was crazy enough to be doing this against the Cowboys. And I said, man, there's nobody down here. The next day, he came down with half the Oakland Raider team. And Gene Fugett and the Oakland Raiders were picketing the Dallas Cowboys. And Tex Schramm said I would never play in the league again. And he was close. I started in Super Bowl 10, and the next year I was the highest paid tight end in the league just because I stood up that day. And there was finally free agency, because even though we didn't win on the strike, we won in the courts. And the judge says, man, y'all can't. So I had to take a 10% pay cut. So my last year with the Cowboys, I made $20,000 for 20 games.
Hard to imagine. But,
again, doing it so that these kids are the tight ends today can make what they're really worth. So I just think it's so exciting in Arizona. I'm excited to see what happens. I mean, we have a senator here running for re-election, Sally, saying that she's for pre-existing conditions, and she's voted 4 times against it. I mean, this thing has gotten to the point now where people can't even fact check. Right. So you just got to go back to the old days when we had the SDS. You should see that trial, the movie of the 7 that's on Netflix, because I lived through that when they went to Chicago and tried to shut down the convention and the whole world's watching. I mean, I lived through that, and they had the draft. And how many people were getting killed every day, just like with this disease.
Mhm.
It was the same thing. People dying in Vietnam and nobody was doing nothing about it. And it took the young people to go to the streets just like they did then. And you should see the recreation of that, because just like then, now the whole world is watching to see what we're going to do on November
Right.
3rd and how we come out of this. And this is a time to really be patriotic and wave that flag.
I know that's right. Well, we're going to do that here at the Necessary Trouble Show to working to save the soul of America and create a platform for voices. And Dad, I'm just so grateful for your voice. And I was explaining to my wife the saying I like to repeat sometimes, which is that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And you're sharing your story today with us, Dad, really helps us give us context to the rhyme we're living through right now that you lived through back in the 60s and 70s. And so hopefully this time we can continue to push our nation and our world forward and make things better for your granddaughters and your grandsons and my grandchildren yet to be born. So, Dad, thank you so much for waking up a little bit earlier this morning out in Arizona and joining us here on Necessary Trouble Show. You can follow my dad at Gene, Jean Fugett, across social media. Dad, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, no, it's an honor. And I can't tell you on behalf of the whole family that we just really appreciate, and the team that you've assembled is world class, and the world is watching. Like they said, the whole world's
All right.
watching.
Amen. Thanks, Dad.
Thanks for watching the Necessary Trouble Show. Please visit necessarytroubleshow.com to support the show and to learn more. Subscribe to our e-newsletter and podcast, and follow us on social media at Necessary Trouble Show.
Good job, Daddy. This is Paige. Thanks for watching.